34 years. Two people still call. That's the whole number. Not because you did something wrong on your way out the door. Not because anybody sat down and decided you weren't worth calling anymore. Just two. Out of every single person who used to have your number saved under something other than your own name. The guy. The boss. Call him first. He'll know. You probably heard about the rest of it, the way most of us hear these things. Sideways. Not in a meeting. Not in a letter. Nothing official at all. A fella you used to work with mentioned it easy as anything, over coffee, like it was nothing. Said when the number 2 compressor went down last month, they called Danny. Not you. Danny. 26 years old. Good kid. You're the one who taught him how to read a pressure gauge in the first place. You're the one who taught him what a bad bearing sounds like before it fails completely. Taught him 100 small things nobody ever wrote down anywhere, because you were the one who was supposed to remember them. And there it was, sitting in your coffee cup, along with everything else on an ordinary Tuesday. Somebody else is the one they call now. Nobody sat you down and told you the job was over. You already knew that part. You had the send-off. Somebody brought a cake. Somebody's kid drew you a card with a stick figure fishing on it, because that's what everybody assumes retirement is supposed to look like from the outside. That ending you were ready for. You'd been ready for years, if you're honest with yourself. This is a different ending. Nobody throws you a party for this one. Nobody even warns you it's coming. You just find out, sideways, over coffee that's already starting to go cold, and you drive home and you don't quite know what to do with what you're carrying. So let's just say the plain version of it out loud, because I think you need to hear somebody actually say it instead of dance around it the way everyone else has been. It's not that they left you out on purpose. Nobody sat in a room and made a decision about you at all, and that's almost the harder part to sit with, if we're honest. It would almost be easier if somebody had decided you weren't needed anymore. At least then there'd be a person to be upset with, a moment to point to. Instead, the world just kept turning the way it always does. Work kept happening the way it always does, and somewhere inside all that ordinary turning, your name quietly stopped being the first one that came to anybody's mind. Danny's name is first now. Or maybe it's the young supervisor you spent 2 years training up, the one who used to shadow you on every call because he didn't trust himself yet to go alone. Or maybe it's the fella 2 doors down who used to just stand in your driveway on a Saturday, watching you work on your truck, asking more questions than a man has any right to ask a neighbor. Here's the question worth actually asking yourself, instead of just feeling the sting and moving on like you're supposed to. You made your peace with retiring. You told other people you were ready to hand it off, and mostly you meant it. So why does hearing somebody else's name land the way it does? Why does it still catch you, months later, standing in your own kitchen with a cup of coffee going cold in your hand? Because wanting to be the one people call has never once been about vanity. It's one of the oldest, plainest things a person can feel, older than any job title, older than any paycheck you ever cashed. It's the feeling of being trusted enough that when something breaks, when something goes wrong in the middle of the night, somebody thinks of you before they think of anybody else on this earth. That's not about rank. That's not about what it said on your business card. That's about being woven so tightly into other people's working lives that you became part of how they solved their problems. And losing that isn't the same as losing a job. Losing a job you can see coming. You can put a date on the calendar for it, buy a cake for it. Losing that other thing, the being leaned on part, is losing a kind of belonging most of us never had a proper name for while we still had it. We just called it work. Turns out it was also something closer to love, and we didn't know it until it was already gone. There's one more thing worth naming here, and I want to say it carefully because it's small, but it's real, and I don't think enough people say it out loud. Sometimes the distance you're feeling isn't even about being forgotten at all. Sometimes some of the people still in it, still grinding through the same shifts you used to grind through, get a little strange around a man who's already out the other side. Not unkind, not cruel, just uncomfortable, in a way they probably couldn't explain if you sat them down and asked them straight out. You remind them of a door they haven't walked through yet themselves. That's not something you did wrong. That's not yours to carry or to fix. That's just a thing that happens sometimes, quietly, and you're allowed to notice it without needing to solve it for them. So here's the real question, the one underneath all of this, the one worth actually sitting with instead of rushing past on your way to feeling better about it. If somebody else is doing the job now and doing it just fine without you, does that mean you never really mattered in the first place? Or does it mean something else, something closer to the truth of it? Your job ended on a specific day. You know that day. You could probably still tell me the date without thinking twice. The last time you clocked in, the last walk out to your truck in that parking lot in the dark. But the role, the part where people leaned their weight on you, doesn't end on anybody's schedule. That ends whenever it ends, sometimes months later, sometimes years later, sometimes in a sentence you overhear secondhand about a compressor and a kid named Danny on an ordinary Tuesday over coffee that hasn't even gone cold yet. That's exactly why this can still catch you off guard, even after you were sure you'd already done your grieving back at that retirement party. You did grieve something that day. You just didn't know there were two separate endings folded inside what looked like one single ending, and the world only ever handed you a calendar date for the first. But here's the part I actually need you to hear, because it changes the shape of the whole thing if you let it. The job running fine without you is not proof that you were forgettable. It is proof of the exact opposite. Whatever you built out there, whatever you taught that kid about pressure gauges and bearings and the particular sound a machine makes right before it fails, whatever systems you put in place, quietly, over years, so the whole operation wouldn't collapse the second you weren't standing in the middle of it anymore, that thing worked. It is still working right now, today, without you having to be there to hold it up. That is not erasure. That is, in fact, the single highest compliment a piece of work can ever receive, that it outlasted the man who built it, standing on its own 2 feet, exactly the way you built it to. And if you're the one who taught Danny half of what he knows, if you trained up your own replacement without ever once meaning to, without anybody putting that job title on a piece of paper for either of you, then this was never really a story about being replaced at all. This is a story about what you left behind, planted in somebody else, still growing whether you're there to see it or not. That's not the same thing as being erased from the picture. That's closer to what a good father hopes for, closer to what a good teacher hopes for, quietly, without ever saying it out loud. Watching somebody else carry something forward that you handed them, whether you ever meant to hand it over on purpose or not. So what do you actually do with all of that, once you can see it clearly? Because I know the logic of it doesn't just switch the feeling off, not by itself. You can understand every word I just said and still feel that small ache some evening, sitting in your kitchen, half wishing the phone would ring with a real problem on the other end of it, something only you could untangle. That ache isn't proof that something is wrong with you. It's proof that the thing you're missing was real in the first place. You don't grieve things that never mattered to you. Here's what I've actually noticed helps, more than trying to talk yourself out of wanting it in the first place. Don't set out to replace the whole thing. You are not going to rebuild 34 years of being the first call for an entire crew. And chasing that size of a thing again is a fast way to make yourself miserable in a much smaller kitchen than the one you're sitting in right now. But you can build something smaller, on purpose this time, instead of by accident the way the first one happened to you. A neighbor a few years behind you on this same road, still working, still scared of what's coming for him someday. A grandkid learning to hold a wrench for the first time, watching your hands instead of a screen for once in his life. Somebody 2 steps behind you on this same path who doesn't know yet that the questions keeping him up at night are the exact same ones you used to answer for a living, without even having to think twice about the answer. That is not a consolation prize. I want to be clear about that, because it can feel like one at first. That is the same exact gift you had before, just handed out on a smaller scale now, on your own terms this time, instead of because a job title said you had to pick up the phone. You do not need 30 people calling you again to feel like yourself. You need one, maybe two, chosen this time instead of assigned to you. And that shift, from being the one they had to call to being the one they get to call, is worth more than it sounds like on paper. I promise you that. 34 years, 2 people still call, but there's a third one now if you go looking for him. Maybe he's the fella from 2 doors down, the one who's always in your driveway on Saturdays. He doesn't have your number in his phone yet, not today, but he will. The day something breaks that he doesn't know how to fix on his own, and it will, because it always does, somebody's going to mention your name to him, easy as anything, over a cup of coffee that hasn't gone cold yet. And this time, you'll already be standing right there. That's not the ending you expected the day you handed in your notice, but it might be the better one. Not because you got your old life back, because you won't, and chasing that particular ghost is its own kind of trap. But because you finally found out, the hard way, what all those calls were actually about this whole time. It was never really about the compressor or the pressure gauge or the bad bearing. It was about the person on the other end of the line, hoping somebody who knew what they were doing would pick up. You still know what you're doing. Somebody out there just hasn't found your number yet.